Ruby and the Wizard by Sheldon King. Chapter 4, Island Life. The next time the children awoke, the ocean was loud like the breathing of some fast animal, crashing breakers dissolving into the gurgling snore of 1,000 tiny stones shifting with the tides. The sun was bright and children were lying on the soft sand. Grandfather was sitting with a group of bare-chested men a little way off. Their bodies were decorated with strange patterns, painted or perhaps scarred onto their skin, and they wore jewellery made of shells and bones. 2 women appeared at the children's side and handed them a large banana leaf plate full of what seemed to be fruit salad and yogurt. The children thanked them with their most polite voices, and the women laughed as the hungry kids devoured their breakfast. After second and third helpings and a whooping dip in the sea, the children were ready to meet Grandfather's friends and learn the reason for their adventure. "This is Oopie," said Grandfather, indicating the eldest of the men. "He is a shaman and has been filling me in on the troubling news from our mutual friend in the Himalayas." "What is a shaman?" asked Poppy. "A shaman," said Grandfather, "is a person who visits other worlds, or perhaps unseen layers of this world, and brings back knowledge and help. Our friend in the Himalaya lives in a tiny village high above the clouds, untouched by the modern world for thousands of years. Now it seems the people have a sickness, they are tired and unfriendly, and the yaks are not getting milked, and the nettles are not being harvested. Nobody wants to get out of bed. Their shaman is the only one who seems to notice, and he has never seen anything like it before. He doesn't know what to do, so we are going to help him." 2 children appeared at the circle, a boy and a girl similar in age to Poppy and her older brother. Their shiny black hair tied back in plaits, their faces serious. Suddenly, the boy produced a small wicker ball from behind his back, and the kids began to laugh. With no further signal, Poppy and Fred ran off down the beach with the other children, and the adults returned to their serious conversation. Despite having no common language, the 4 children were soon friends, and they played together until the women called them back for lunch. Lunch was some sort of coconut curry, again served on banana leaves, and although it was more spicy than they were used to, Poppy and Fred were so hungry they ate it anyway. Grandfather began gathering their things together, and the children did not allow their sadness at leaving their new friends to dampen their excitement to continue their adventure and assist Grandfather in his important work. It was then that they noticed there was no sign of Ruby. "This way!" called Grandfather, shouldering the bags, and the 3 set off through the jungle, accompanied by Oopie the shaman. A short way into the jungle, they reached a clearing in which stood a small old-fashioned aeroplane with an open cockpit and a single propeller on the front. "Where?" began Fred. "People see what they want to see," said Grandfather, winking. "Or maybe what they're ready to see." The children climbed into the aeroplane, and the long golden rope appeared and fastened them in tightly. The shaman spun the propeller a few times, and the engine sputtered into life. The children covered their ears, and the aircraft started off down the narrow runway through the trees. Just as it seemed that the runway would run out, they lifted off and were banking up and round and into the sky. As they rose, the children could see that in fact they had been on a small island, and it was one of many. Some just a couple of rocks wide, dotted around in the sea. Poppy thought how much they looked like green cherries on a big blue cake. Once again, the children were fast asleep. Chapter 5. Mountains. Things were very different when the children awoke. Above them the sky was blue and so bright it hurt their sleepy eyes, but below them the sea was swirling and white. In one moment the children realized that their faces were numb with cold and the sea was not the sea, but a crazy meringue of clouds. For one strange minute, Poppy thought that perhaps it really was a giant meringue. But as the cold, wispy steam passed her face, she knew that they were impossibly high in the clouds. But it was okay. They were in an aeroplane. Then she remembered the words of her grandfather, the wizard. People see what they want to see. So she looked again, and there in front of them was the huge golden horse pulling their chariot through the sky with strong strokes of her powerful wings. The wizard had wrapped them in warm blankets while they slept, and they pulled them up closer around their necks when suddenly Fred cried, "Mountains!" and he began pointing excitedly off into the distance. There were, indeed, mountains, but not rising up in front of them as you might expect, but far below them, poking their snowy heads through the clouds. Fred felt sure that any minute a solid cliff face would appear in front of them, and wished the flying horse would slow down. Their grandfather, the wizard, seemed completely unconcerned and kept turning around to engage the children in light conversation and in stories of adventures he had shared with the shaman as a young wizard. The mist cleared for a second, and Fred realized that they were perilously close to the rocky walls of a steep-sided valley. They plunged sickeningly down as the wizard continued talking. So he said, if there's a spell to turn them into frogs, then surely... He was laughing so much at this point that he almost forgot the point of his story. Then surely one of these books must be able to explain how to turn them back. What is my mother going to say? And I replied, Ribbit. Fred was determined not to vomit. Ribbit, said the wizard again, holding his sides and not even slightly aware of where they were going as they descended further into the mist. I am not going to vomit. I am not going to vomit. I am not going to vomit. I think I might, started Fred. Fred was vomiting. Poppy was still laughing at Grandfather's story as the vomit flew past her head and off into the mist. That was close, she said. It was, said Grandfather. We were running out of flies. Suddenly, the ground was just a few feet below them, and they slowed and floated down to a small grassy knoll bordered by a forest on one side and a rocky moonscape on the other. Once they had landed the chariot, the children became aware of a huge rock shaped like a prehistoric hand tool belonging to some enormous giant. Although the sky was darkening and stormy-looking, they could still make out a small, wizened figure standing in the shadow of the rock. The figure came closer, offering a thin, quavering hand to welcome their grandfather. He was certainly the oldest person the children had ever seen. His face was like melted wax, and balanced on his bony nose was a tiny pair of spectacles, with one arm missing and glass so thick that they would occasionally see the mountain behind his head refracted through them. This was the shaman. The children had heard so many tales about him, feats of bravery and sublime magic, but whatever they had imagined, a fierce warrior, a mysterious wizard in a starry cape, it was not this fragile, bird-like character perched on a rock in front of them. He led them to a round tent nestled in the trees. Inside was warm and smelled of smoke. It was big enough that there was room for a small fire in the centre. Around the outside were rugs and animal skins, and on the walls were paintings and tapestries of frightening demons and beautiful goddesses, clouds and mountains and lotus. The children had never been so comfortable, and after they had finished washing in a pail of hot water the shaman had ready for them, they ate the most delicious soup they had ever tasted. Then they wrapped themselves in blankets and listened to the shaman, telling stories and singing songs until the sound of his voice faded